It's been 124 years since almost 300,000 innocent lives were brutally murdered. Their crime was simple: refusing to cultivate a cotton for exports. Their remains, all battered and somewhat impossible to put together, made it even difficult for their families to give them a befitting burial. The perpetrators of this hideous crime did not end there. Instead, they decided to transport the skulls of these victims back to their country as a show of supremacy and the achievement of assembling these skulls as trophies. The genocide attacks on Tanzania's then Tanganyika by the Germans happened when Tanzania was under the German colonization in 1900. Their rule was primarily driven by imperialistic ambitions, racial superiority beliefs, and economic interests. Aimed at exploiting the country's resources, the Germans established control over strategic trade routes and asset dominance over the local population. The Germans then implemented oppressive policies that marginalized and exploited the indigenous population of Tanzania. The imposition of forced labor, heavy taxation, land acquisition, brutal suppression of any resistance were common tactics used to subjugate the local communities. The people of Tanzania were forced to work without pay, and things got even worse when they were told to stop cultivating food crops. Hunger began to gnaw at them to the extent that they started eating the cotton they cultivated in the fields for their colonial masters. The fear instilled by examples of people who showed deviance by refusing to be enslaved by the Germans, being whipped naked in front of their wives and children, and others being shelled their hearts, making everyone accept these atrocities reluctantly. Deeply ingrained with racist beliefs that portrayed Africans as inferior and justified their mistreatment and exploitation, the Germans continued dehumanizing Tanzanians with impunity. The Maji rebellion, which was primarily in response to the harsh conditions imposed by the German colonial authorities and their exploitation of the local population, compelled Tanzanians from various ethnic groups to unite in resistance of the movement against German colonial rule. In retaliation, the Germans launched a brutal military campaign to suppress the rebellion. Villages were destroyed, crops were burnt, and thousands of Tanzanians were killed in a ruthless crackdown. The Germans used extreme violence and tactics such as mass execution, forced labor camps, and scorched earth policies to squash the rebellion and maintain control. Today, descendants of tribal leaders executed by the German colonial forces are demanding the return of their ancestors' skull, believed to be held in a museum in Berlin. One of those killed was Mangi Meli, a leader of the Chaga tribe, and Kinjekitile Bokero Ngwale, who was hanged by the treason by German colonial officials. Kinjekitile Ngwale was believed to be the initiator of what came to be known as the Maji War, as he was idolized as a spirit from water that managed to convince thousands of Tanzanians that his sacred water has powers to protect them from the German bullet during the 7-Year War. The legacy of this dark chapter in history continues to impact Tanzania and serves as a reminder of the atrocities committed during the colonial era. Indeed, the Maji rebellion will still remain a horrific experience to Tanzanians despite the apologies recently rendered by the German president in 2023 during the Maji rebellion for Tanzania, so their families can be consoled. Just as the Germans were in 2018 able to send the skulls of the brutally murdered Nambian victims in a similar genocide attack, it would just be right for the country to return the skulls of the heroes that went down during the Maji rebellion for their families to be consoled. Sometimes, saying a mere sorry is not enough. Bring back our skulls.